it's a game. Haters whisper my name. Suckers want what I slang. Arrogant and
I have to say, I never thought I'd ever play a game with a story like this. Now, a lot of games treat the story as something of lesser importance, but the Mafia series has always been a shining example of how a game should treat its story. Few have ever managed to weave their narrative so perfectly into how the game plays like Mafia Iii has. I was truly left in awe during the game's prologue. It is as well crafted as any great film or series. Frankly, it may be better than most films these days. I was very curious to see if the story could keep up with the high expectations that it was clearly setting. Something funny actually happened though. While I was busy thinking about the possibilities that the story could hold, I realized underneath all that stupendous writing, there is a very well-made and extremely satisfying gaming experience to be had.
Hey, we're gonna pull this off.
I was very surprised to see how meticulous the game's design is. The story worked hand in hand with the game's objectives to provide meaningful context that really fueled the story by providing great motivation to the player. What really stands out about the game's design is how they have laid out the world to organically progress you through the game's story. We have seen games do much of what Mafia Iii is doing, however they have not pulled it off as successfully as Mafia Iii has. When it comes to blending a narrative into an open world, you often have mixed results, either too little focus on the fun, or too little focus on the story. Well, Mafia Iii seems keen on addressing some interesting gaming tropes in a very nuanced manner. There are, of course, the hidden items you will expect to hunt for. But they have really gone above and beyond in creating a world that is just vividly detailed and alive. Items are not just hidden behind corners, they're in garages, restaurants, and so much more. Too often a game will just have you doing things. Yet in Mafia Iii, they've really managed to give greatly detailed reasons for your actions. I have not played a game that had such a terrific narrative flow like this, while also delivering that same kind of satisfaction and enjoyment that games in this genre have thrived on. It is something that really needs to be played to understand. Pacing is key, and few games know when to take away control to focus on progressing the story in favor of gameplay. It is something that needs to be done in the right amount. Too little focus on the story will have most gamers bored, and too much will result in the same. The nature of the genre's gameplay mechanics, however, are at odds with most forms of storytelling. The story is there to provide a context for what you're doing, but how can you truly fuel this much rampant violence and retribution? Well, you could make a game set in the South in the late 60s and make the protagonist African American. It's a ballsy decision using race and, to get down to it, racism as the focal point of the story. It has never been done in a game like this. It could very well have come across as manipulative or cheap, simply being provocative for the sake of shock value, and look what we did. Yet the writers have really outdone themselves and delivered a story that does the subject matter justice. Racism has rarely been presented so authentically. Most games have resorted to using comedy to soften the blow, and while there is comedy present in Mafia Iii, the tone is serious and it never pulls any of its punches. This is a game that really is trying to present an honest look at this country's history of racism that is honorable in its own right.
You never had to go looking for some place to belong. Never had to bleed in a jungle just to find your real brothers.
What, however, must not be understated is simply how incredible it is to be playing a game like this. Subject matter that I simply never would have dreamed to be in a game. Rockstar has tackled racism, but they again have always used that comedic shield. Hey, it's a satire. Not to discredit Rockstar, that stuff took balls. which is why this game's achievement in storytelling is so incredible. No studio except Rockstar has tried to truly push what kind of topics could be used in a game like this. The reason being, no one thought a game would ever be capable of dealing with these kind of mature adult themes and placing them in such a realistic context. Violence is often used as pure shock value in a lot of games. Few games have implied the brutality of their violence as part of their story's context, like Mafia Iii has done so masterfully. It reminds me of the great crime thrillers of the 70s. Taxi Driver came to mind several times during my playthrough. I also adored the hints of First Blood in the mix as well. These are very good points of reference, and you can really see how they influence the game's story. It is also fitting, given how that era's films have helped shape the genre as a whole. Context and details matter greatly in these kind of games. People clamor for innovation in mission design, but realistically, there's only so much you can do with these type of mechanics. Gaming has evolved to the point where we can make great stories, much like the TV shows that everyone loves to binge these days. Innovation in gaming comes from blending the gameplay elements of the genre with new forms of storytelling, which gives tremendous weight to all of the game's objectives. When you have a story with so much substance, it makes even those supposedly dull run here and get this missions fun and enjoyable, due to the context it brings to the overall narrative. Furthermore, the mission objectives are inventive and extremely well thought out. The research into the time period really made things feel quite authentic, and that gave them a greater connection to the story, something that is very rare in this genre. And this is a genre that is mostly about running around, shooting people, stealing cars, and creating general mayhem. With few exceptions, most games in this genre smartly forgo attempts to deliver great stories. The mechanics just do not lend themselves well to storytelling. It is a great challenge that few developers have conquered. But there is so much detail to Mafia III's story and world that all the key elements of an open-world action game, killing a great number of people in hair-raising gun battles, vicious stealth hunts, and savory car chases, actually make sense to the game's story. It can be a challenge to give compelling reasons for your objectives, and to make the set pieces fit into the world organically without harming the tone or structure of the story. And it is also equally important to know when to focus on not just the fun gameplay elements, but to really structure a story that pulls you in to give you enough control that you actually feel like you're experiencing that story firsthand. Well, that is when it becomes an art form. If you can captivate the player and draw them into the story, then the gameplay becomes a cathartic release of emotions that story perfectly built up. You are presented with vile and disgusting enemies to vanquish in some truly savage ways, and nothing makes action more satisfying than a solid emotional core. It is why The Last of Us was such an incredible experience. Story matters because of the context it provides to your actions. When you have a need to complete a mission more than just to get to the next level, when you feel on some level what your character feels, it adds so much more to that experience. Great gameplay can make a great game, but a great story can too, and a great story should be just as much of an accomplishment as making a gun feel satisfying to fire. Combat in Mafia III is no slouch. Melee takedowns are some of the most savage and visceral combat options in a game like this. Most shooters aspire to have that cinematic edge. You should feel like you're playing one of the coolest shootouts in movie history. But few shooters have ever captured that style of a gritty, bloodthirsty cinematic shootout like Mafia III has. It gets your blood pumping to have such precise control over your character, and seeing them move and react with such lifelike animation is a real treat for the eyes. What also will get your blood pumping is the utter shocking sense of realism in the game's violence. We are used to shooting people and seeing them fall dead. We rarely see people withering in agony as they lay dying after a particularly ferocious gun battle. It adds great dramatic depth. When you see blood spatter on the wall and people react in horror to your actions, it strikes you more when you're playing in a world alive with such rich detail. It also gives the game a much needed level of maturity. Yes, the violence in the game does have that cathartic, oh yes, take it, you horror level of satisfaction. But it also presents these actions for what they are. Callous. It is even more of an accomplishment due to the fact that it makes the game all the more enjoyable for that very reason. Great art should elicit a response from the viewer. Art should be provocative because that is what an artist truly is, a provocateur. Yet what separates the good art from the mundane day-to-day art are the reasons for provocation. Anyone can easily provoke their audience, but it takes skill to know when and why to provoke them. Mafia Iii does everything it sets out to do exceedingly well. From a pure gameplay mechanics standpoint, driving, shooting, traversal, it is all done as well as it should be. Frankly, any game this ambitious is going to have a few shortcomings. Thankfully, none of them are unfixable. Truly, the only thing holding this game back is its technical shortcomings. The game does crash on occasion, and the AI can do some pretty wacky things for little to no reason. Thankfully, none of these are game-breaking, just minor annoyances.
Just to have you near.
Now, the game can also look a bit rough in places, but it also looks truly magnificent in others. Lighting effects are breathtaking and really evoke the cinematic feel the creators were clearly going for. It stands out best in an early mission that has Lincoln Clay, the protagonist, cutting his way through some racist scum in an abandoned amusement park attraction. The game does a great job of making places feel both real and alive, but also making the world a truly unique and wondrous character in of itself. Games like this do not come around often, and that is a shame. On a side note, I would like to tackle one big criticism the game has faced. There is no such thing as dated gameplay. Describing gameplay as dated, like that is a negative thing, is the weakest excuse to say a great game is bad. And Mafia Iii is certainly a great game. It may have its issues, but once you step back and absorb the game for what it truly is, unless the subject matter just is not your cup of tea, I think you'd be hard-pressed not to be truly impressed by Mafia Iii. So thank you very much, Hangar13, for creating one hell of a gaming experience that I will not be putting down anytime soon. It's been a pleasure to bring you this review. Please give a thumbs up. Lastly, don't forget to share the video so others may partake as well. Have a great one, folks. Catch you in the next video.